I gotta go.
Hey, Aaron.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, pretty good.
Good, good. So as usual, we'll get started at about 12:35 Eastern Time. Give people folks to come on. So everyone is, as usual, we'll get started in about 4 minutes. So just hang tight. Nice to see some new folks joining us. Hi folks, if you're just coming on, know that we'll get started in a little bit. How's everyone doing today? Good thing. It's a nice springy Friday in Pittsburgh. Rainy, that means. Welcome, folks. We'll get started usually around 12:35. Give people time to wander in. I love that someone put their name as double booked, might check in, but I have no idea who that is. Is that Norm? I think people are still coming in, so just gonna wait another minute. Okay, let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Torus community meeting for May. We have these monthly. In case you're just now joining us, you can join us every month. I think it's the first Friday of every month. Today's meeting will be about math support. So we're really excited to talk to those folks, talk to you all who develop or deliver any kind of math in your courses, and to talk with us about what you need and what has been maybe some pain points for you, or even what are aspects of courses that teach math concepts. What do they need? Maybe there's things we haven't even thought of before. So right now, just a few of these are just a few pictures of some activities that we have and some capabilities we have in our courses now. But what those are essentially are, if you didn't know, we have the ability to create parameterized questions, meaning that you can create a question that has variables in it that then can just create more questions from it. We have branching questions. We have different, we have input keyboards that pop up, particularly for LaTeX, for either authoring math content and questions, or even for students to input equations. And then that's kind of what we have already, but let's talk about anything else related to equations, equation authoring, maybe visualization needs, possibly integration needs, meaning external content that you might want to integrate. We could touch on that a little bit too. But I think I'll open it up first to say, how many of you, yeah, MathML, we do, I believe, have that as well. And I'll apologize up front. I am not very versed in creating content for math courses. So I did invite Sandy Razor, and I see that Dave Aaron is on. They're used to doing that kind of stuff with chemistry. And there's some other folks on here, I'm sure, who's had to deal with math content development. So how many of you actually do deal with this kind of content? No,
we do.
Done. Yes, yes. And what's been in your experience? Anybody want to share what their experience has been to date?
Okay. I don't know.
Good or bad?
I don't know. MathML is complicated, but once you get the hang of it, it works fairly readily. I have no idea what to say.
That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
I actually don't know the types of things that need to be discussed. I wanted to focus on this particular kind of content and capabilities again, because I'm not used to developing these courses and I want to kind of understand if the needs that exist already are good enough. If there's things that you've experienced outside of OLI that maybe you thought, what, why can't we do that kind of thing?
I
Is
could
math
address that.
it's not, go ahead, yeah.
Sure. Gideon Weinstein. I work at WGU. And since we're fully asynchronous, what we really look for is not so much parameterized questions, but detailed solution keys, so that the heavy lifting of the sort of rote and practice foundation can be done by the technology, and the interaction with the human is left to what you only need a human for: pattern seeking, complete confusion, thematic learning tricks, metacognitive strategies,
Oh,
specific problem solving techniques like Heart of Mathematics talks about. And right, so what we found so far, do you mind if I use your competitors' names?
I'm fine with that. Go ahead.
We love hate Pearson because their written material is, as far as, this is just my opinion, I don't speak for my institution. My opinion is their written material ought to be thrown out and they just ought to focus on my math lab, because that gives exactly what we're looking for, and we can customize it very, very easily. We can even use their programming language as it exists to do our own parameterization. So we love that, because if you go to question help, there's an immense amount of awesome ability to teach the students step by step. That's really great. And we used a very primitive version of OLI statistics. And one of the main problems was there's only 2 versions of every question. And the feedback for the wrong answers was useful, but very, very sparse. So a deep enrichment of feedback, I think, is what any OLI would want to seek, because they're often going to be used online, and even if they're not used online, don't you face-to-face people want the homework you assign to be maximally effective? So that's my main deal. We had a college geometry course. We got a company, private company that does a little bit of what OLI does. They kind of look like Acrobatic, different interface. And the big problem there was they had great programmers, but no mathematicians. So we had to write all of our problems in pseudocode, which they would turn into code and embed in their system, right? So really easy code would be great. I don't mean LaTeX, because we would use images in geometry. What I mean is we'd have to tell them, okay, for this side of the triangle, let it be an integer between 6 and 9, and for that side of the triangle, blah, blah, blah. And then we'd create multiple choice options very carefully, predicting common errors, and we'd write the solution keys, and then they would do the actual programming that would generate the numbers and do the algorithms and drop them into the problem and the solution manual. So the student got that interactivity that we like. But we did it was basically, we could have just learned coding, done it ourselves.
Right.
So that's what I would strongly recommend, that you have the ability on staff to do that, so that people don't have to do it on their own or customize on their own.
Interesting. You've hit on a number of things that I didn't even include in this list, but I'm glad you brought them up. Solution keys is something we struggle with. The fact that we pool questions and the way our pools are created, makes that challenging. But it also, because we have to create all of those questions and then put them in those pools so they're fed to students in a certain way. I'm interested in knowing more about the authoring capabilities that you were talking about with Pearson. Besides coding, being able to get right in there, what kind of interface do they provide for that?
So you make a diagnostic. We call them diagnostics, not quizzes or tests or anything,
Mhm.
because we have our own internal assessments, of course.
Right, right.
So we create a diagnostic. It's rather a simple interface. You simply go through what they've provided. What they provide is an exact mirror of what they give in the various subsections of their, you know, paper and paste textbook, right? You know, there are 4 kinds of problems or 8 kinds of problems in that 120 item problem set. What they've done is they've sort of cloned a few of them and made them algorithmic, cloned a lot of them. Often there's a choice of 30, 50 different kinds of items. And each kind of item is a clone of either that type of problem or even a clone of a specific problem, where what happens is if I pick it, it'll algorithmically generate the variables. Sometimes it'll even algorithmically change the nouns. And then and it will often algorithmically generate answer keys, although they do like fill in the blank a lot.
Mhm.
And then when the student reviews their diagnostic, they can do this thing called review results. And what that does is when they were wrong, it shows them how to do it right. And the best thing is it's step by step. So it does a step, and then it asks the student, you know, what's the next computation? And then if they try twice and fail, okay, this is the answer, and this is the next step. Okay, and the next thing to do is this. What do you get? So they have the feeling of a tutoring experience. And remember, all these numbers were algorithmically generated, parameterized, but the solution keys pull on that parameters. That's what our geometry group did. They pulled on the parameters. We provided the full text of the solutions, sometimes even step by step, and they put in the parameters because we knew how to use them. That was sort of the big deal
Yeah.
for our students when we realized that we could do that. And then of course, what do? We customize it, right? We use pools also. Oh, we don't want to get into the inverse trig derivatives, but let's do the trig derivatives.
Mhm.
Let's just do sine and cosine for now, right? And then we'll have another diagnostic that warns them these are the other trig functions, right? Or here are trig ones that involve the chain rule, right? So we can custom draw from those pools to create our own diagnostics, and then boom, they're available to students from then on. And then we can edit them as we change our assessment to either shrink or enrich the
Mhm.
material that we emphasize, right? So that leaves you a lot of flexibility to customize their fixed book to your needs,
Right.
right? Whereas where you're providing parameterized questions, but there's not, and drawing from your own pools of a finite number of problems, that's good, but where's the customization, right?
Mhm.
Where's my knowledge of exactly what your point is? What's your learning objective for each item? If I see that explicitly, I can instantly customize your book to my needs and
Mhm.
fill in the gaps if I have with other material, if I have additional requirements. Generally not, because we really do like the style of writing of most of the OLI we've looked at in, the stats OLIs that we've looked at from you.
Mhm. Well, I really appreciate you sharing all of that. It's really helpful. Does this resonate with others on the call? Does this sound like some things that you would like to see more of us do?
I guess one thing I'm hearing is Ken Kadinger, is the need for more multi-step kinds of problem interactions, and I
Yes.
guess the solution key thing seems like I'm confused by that, because as I put in the chat, it seems like more than 80% of OLI questions have computer gradable solution keys. Certainly in my e-learning course, it's probably more than 80%. I mean, we have some submit and compares, which are open-ended text fields, right? That don't have solution keys, but we don't have a lot of multi-step problem sort of activities that get feedback in the way.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I can definitely see that would be nice.
Yeah, I think in the past, what we've had to do is, I'm taking some notes here. That's why I'm looking down, but in the past, we've had to really carefully think through and author those deliberately, not have that done kind of in this, it's kind of a using the parameterized question, or the ability to have algorithmic type questions, but also have them break down and provide solutions at every step. And I
Yeah,
know,
yeah. Well,
yeah,
one version of that is like the assessment style, where you ask a one-step, macro question, and if the student gets it wrong, then it expands into sub-questions. And that seems technically pretty feasible, but it would mean another question type in the Torus pool of question types, if you
well,
see what I mean.
I've
actually,
actually
go
done
ahead.
that in the chemistry course with the branching questions. So basically,
great.
you have kind of the macro question that is a problem that involves multiple steps. And if they get it incorrect, then they get a series of questions that kind of lead them to be able then to go back and get the correct answer. So the functionality is there. I guess that I'm not sure if that's in Torus yet or not, but that is available in the OLI system at this point.
Yeah, again, it's just a matter of knowing it's there and then being able to use it. And it still requires careful design. Like, Sandy, you had to really think through what all those steps are and what kind of scaffolding would be needed to serve up. And I guess what I'm hearing from this other system is that it uses those algorithms even further in some way, which is interesting.
Well, there's no substitute for good design, but the
right.
authoring is not going to magically do that for you.
Right.
But I guess Sandy's question, I wasn't sure if I heard, is that type in Torus at this point?
It's not in Torus. I mean, it will be. We have it available in Echo at the moment.
Uh-huh.
So
that would be great to make you. We could certainly find applications to use it.
Yeah, I don't know that many others have, and I've seen Sandy use it, and but I haven't seen it used too much more than that. But again, it could be a matter of folks dipping their toe into authoring and not getting. I mean, Sandy's been iterating on this course for many years, and so it does require that careful look and consideration of for design, and then looking at the data and seeing where more scaffolding needs to be built in. Yeah.
Hey, this is Dave. I do think there's a interesting dividing line between the technology, like what's the general functionality, and then what's the specific thing the authors do.
Mm-hmm.
And what's there now, that it's kind of like you write your own JavaScript and they have a library that helps, right? And so the thing that the earlier speaker was referring to with being able to go in and say, oh, we'll just do these functions for now, and then we'll do ag and later functions, arcsign. That, if you the current system will allow that in the sense that when you write these questions, once you're given the ability to insert the JavaScript, you can do anything you want, and so that would show up as just a list of here's the things you can select for this random variable. So I think at the lower level technology, the abilities may be there. And then the question is, at the course level writers, getting things written in a way that they're easily customizable, kind of a different issue, I think, than the fundamental technology.
Yeah, I think so too. It might be that folks don't realize that most of, that we have this authoring platform that we allow for customization, and you really just need to kind of reach out and we can get you set up to do that.
That leads to an interesting follow-up. I'm brand new to the Torus community, so if I'm covering old territory, say look at archive, whatever, I'm perfectly happy to be shut down and shut up. I like David's comments about, you know, the guts of it, the programming of it, right? The JavaScript of it. But as I'll pretend I'm a typical end user of what
Mhm.
Torus is going to be.
Right.
I don't want to have to dig into that. I mean, I've successfully avoided learning LaTeX in 35 years doing mathematics, specifically because I want to be in the feet of an end user who is very busy, right? A college low-level
Can I
instructor or a
jump
high
in,
school
Gideon?
teacher, right? Yes, please jump in.
Yeah, it is WYSIWYG now. You know, it's like a form
Good.
editor. Yeah, right. You
That
pick
is
the question
awesome.
type and you fill in the form.
And is that decision made, like, that was my other thing, you know, how customizable is it for a user ignorant of coding? Or is that like a question to be determined? That's part of the design thinking of Torus.
Well, it's hard to answer that question precisely, but I think our past summer schools where people come in a week, they've authored a novel course material, what actually within a day or so they're starting to, right? Is indication that it's pretty easy to pick up.
Yeah, and by the way, it's okay if you're not familiar with these things. I mean, I've really opened up this community so that we can get more folks, hear more from other folks who maybe aren't familiar with our tools and capabilities. And that to me is a nice balance to find out, like, are we doing things, are the things we have helpful? And what could we be missing that we haven't thought of because we're seeing it just from our perspective. So it's okay if you aren't familiar with some of our stuff right now. Very excited to have this good discussion though. So along those lines, let me check the chat a little bit here and see if I've missed any good points. What I'm hearing though is so far is that this idea, this ability to do these, what we're calling parameterized questions or algorithmic type question pools, might exist, but it seems like there's some UX we could really think through to make that very accessible to all types of users.
Yeah, to get back to that, I was thinking there's sort of three levels of authors, even the sort of fundamental technology. There's the things that the courses write, and then there's the customization done by the type where you don't want to get into the JavaScript. And the functionality is there. I think the course people have the functionality they need to write these things. They may not have the functionality they need to add tool, make it easy for other people to change. Like we have the ability to change the list of parameters, but we don't have the ability to provide a user interface so that other people can do it more easily than we can. You know what I mean? Like that part. Anyway.
Yeah, that's helpful, David. And I mean, especially coming from you and Sandy, who really worked on this a lot and used these capabilities to their fullest, really. So as someone who doesn't author a lot of these types of courses, I was thinking of, possibilities, like what would I want if I were to do this? And one of the things I put down here are visualization needs. So I can imagine there's some novel ways we could create activities or things to be able to help with, graphing or, doing some cool activities that have you manipulate visuals. Is that something that would be interesting? I don't know. I'm really making stuff up. I think.
Well, I have one, related to this discussion for the 20% or so submit and compare questions that we have. I'd love to be able to do the kind of learner sourcing that Shu Wang has done on those, whereby I can then, the team can then inspect those and decide, which ones are correct and which are near misses, and make multiple choice questions from those that can be graded. And it feels like that, some routine that would facilitate that kind of transformation. Of course, it requires somebody to go in and code those as correct or and near miss. But you know, you only need sort of like 1 or 2 correct and 3 to 6 near misses, and you've got, you know, at least 2 versions of that question at that point in a multiple choice form, and where the, you know, the incorrect choices are now clearly plausible because they come from real students.
Yeah, that's a great point, Ken. In fact, I'm knee deep in this right now. Tom V and I are, you know, we're working on, Tom V is managing the development of a physics course. And, you know, I used to give an estimate to folks who are developing courses of any type that, you know, per question, it's going to take you a good 30 minutes to write a good question. You know, given all the answer options and feedback and hints that you can write. And then that gets easier and you get better at it. And you can get down to about 15 minutes in my experience. But when you're talking about these physics problems where so many things can go wrong with any given problem, and you want to capture that and you want to make those, you want to write that feedback specifically to what are the common wrong answers for any given problem, that gets really challenging and it blows that time up to for any one given question to do that. So some easy way, some way of really being able to capture those responses, those answers through an open-ended question is an interesting thought for sure.
And to what extent do we have decent entry of equations? Is that something like Desmos, the graphing calculator, that kind of functionality? I could picture places where we would use it in chemistry, but is there something like that already in Torus?
That's a good question that I actually don't know the answer to. I believe we have an input keyboard where students can input an equation as an answer. I don't know if that's in Torus yet. Does anybody on the call can know about this and can speak to it?
So I don't know. I know that the equation input has been recently developed. I've not used it. I've thought that, like Dave, there's certainly some parts of the chemistry course where there's potential to use it. But Erin, do you know if anyone has used it? Do you have any examples of that? Or is there any documentation or a demo or anything? Because I believe it was Anders that was working on it. And when he first started working on it, I looked at it and gave him some feedback, but I haven't looked at it again since then. And just a little bit more information on that would be helpful.
Yeah, good point, Sandy. I don't know enough about it to know if it's fully done and if it's in use anywhere. But this leads me to, you know, an idea that we should probably hold a webinar to just highlight our method authoring capabilities as they exist now, because even the folks, I think, who do this on a regular basis, like yourself, aren't even aware of what we have, and frankly, I don't really either. So good idea to ask that question, and we'll have to remedy that. I think you're the only one that spoke up, unless other folks have used it who are on this call.
Used what? What's that?
Use the equation input keyboard.
We haven't used the existing one, but it would be lovely to be able to specify one.
Yeah.
And that would be for logic, so we'd want a different symbol base.
Yeah. Like it would be easy to whip up like a little XML spec for it where you have what it should put in the ASCII and what the Unicode symbol you want and what order you want the symbols to be displayed in. I would think something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it would be really nice to have a keyboard, because this has actually been a topic of discussion recently. And we have a little guide that we have to put a link to in every activity. So it would be nice to have, I don't like reading guides, I just like pushing buttons option.
Right, right. Yeah, I will definitely look into that more and see what examples we have, what we have developed so far, and see where they are with it. I do want to get back to this answer key thing, because Ken, to your point, yeah, a lot of our questions are auto graded, right? So I think you're thinking of it in terms of that. I think what others might be thinking of is something that we've done for statistics, which is because like the quizzes, the end of module quizzes are in pools. We then provide for in the instructor resources section, all of the possible questions that a student could have with their answers. And that's more support instructors who are using these courses and need to be able to.
Is there an automated thing to do that?
There is not.
Okay, so it's what I used to do, which is making a separate version of the quiz that says, instead of draw one from this pool, draw like 1,000, and it covers your bases. Yeah.
Yeah, I think how they've been done, I know we have it in statistics, and I had to actually, it was Kim Larson who created these, and I had to actually ask her how she did it. And what I understand is she would possibly take the XML of all the pools and dump them into an HTML file that then can be.
Okay. Yeah, that sort of thing in general is something that we've wanted since the beginning of time, as far as I know. Just a way for instructors to see all possible questions on their quiz attempts too. Like that would.
So in what way do you use those then? Is it just to solve disputes of the grading, or is there more that you would use this for?
Well, a lot of the time we get new instructors, especially asking about questions drawn from pools, and they don't realize it's more than one could appear in that location. And so there's some initial confusion with, well, this student said this thing about question 6 and this other student said this other thing. I don't know what's going on. I see a different thing entirely.
Yeah. Okay.
Because there are 3 questions and you happen to get each. So when the instructor does their attempts, it would be really fantastic if they could, if there was something, this question is drawn from a pool even.
Mm-hmm.
You may not see the same question as your students. Not all students will see the same question. Something like that at least would be good.
Mm-hmm.
Whether they're looking at their own attempt or even at the students' work. And just some way for instructors to cycle through all the questions that could appear in a given location. That would be an incredible thing. I think that would be fantastic.
Okay.
We don't do that specifically for instructors, but when we are proofing the course, we have a version of they're essentially our lesson test pools where every single question is there so that the instructor can go through and make sure that they are done correctly. I'm sure there's a mechanism to make it so that it's instructor only page so they can see all the items in a particular pool.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Like if someone we could just have an instructor view of that whole quiz and not just a part of it, not just but all of the pool questions.
Yeah, the only difficulty, of course, is that unless you're not randomizing the pool from a pool, everyone's getting a different version of the exercise.
Right.
But isn't a different version of the exercise okay, just so long you have a grade book that the instructor can go into and see the exact instance of what the student did? Just right, so recorded in the grade book or grade book whatever, right? So maybe they took it 3 or 4 different times and they want to talk to you about the third time, number 7. If you have all 5 recorded in the grade book style thing, you and the student can, you can pull it up as the student, looking
That's
through it
right.
as if you're in their grade book, right? Is that
Good.
already a capability?
It is.
Yeah, yeah. You can see exactly what students saw and what questions they what their answers were. Now, this actually, I just thought of something linking to parameterized questions. You would be able to reduce your pools by using parameterized, so that, for us, we have questions about a formula, say, like P implies Q is the basis, and then we ask questions about this formula to simplify things. So we could have, P and Q are parameters. So each student would see a different combination of letters. So we'd be able to reduce the pools. Instead of having 4 copies with different letters, say, for each exact question, we could say, just give them random letters and only have 1 copy of each question. Would that be possible? And can the parameters be reused over multiple questions? Like you said, okay, let's define P, like 1 parameter is P, so stick in a letter for that. 1 parameter is Q, stick in a letter for that. And then there are like 3 questions that use those same things.
Mhm.
Is that currently already possible? Or is this in development?
No, I believe what you're saying is possible. Again, I'm just not sure exactly how, and again, that's why I was saying I need to like have a webinar where we demonstrate these capabilities, because we definitely have the ability to do something that you're saying. I'm just not quite sure how, and I don't see why we couldn't create it and then duplicate it, because we have the ability to duplicate questions then and copy them, and then you could change the variables if you want from that.
One strategy that can be used to do this is to do, rather than having online parameterized question generation, it can be done offline. So in the cognitive tutor authoring tools, there's this mass production idea where you can take a problem you've authored. It can be a multi-step problem, but it doesn't have to be. But its key problem-specific features get put into a column in a table. And then you can add columns to change those features. And you can write Excel formulas that change those features. So essentially you can do parameterized questions. You can change the letters or the numbers, and make as many columns as you want, and then upload that table to get a whole pool of related items. And it seems like that idea could be incorporated into Torus in a way that, it does offer some nice flexibility, because sometimes when you randomly generate, weird things happen. And here, if you do the random generation offline, you can then check for those weird things and correct it in the table, like zeros coming up in weird places is one example where, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for describing that, Ken. So that capability exists in CChat. I know I'm not sure exactly how it works in in Echo at the moment. But yeah, you can duplicate. I know you can duplicate questions. So if you set one up, then you could duplicate it and change what you need to. And I think Sandy's saying, yeah, the easiest way to do this, we duplicate an existing parameterized question and then modify it as needed. I'm
Going
glad
back to the
go ahead.
Solution keys.
Mhm.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate your point, Aaron, about the quizzes, because now that I think about it, like in my e-learning design course, there are a lot of quiz questions that don't have sufficient feedback. And as I think it was Gideon was saying, especially on incorrect responses.
Mhm.
But this seems like another opportunity if we were to do some learner sourcing. Like I'm thinking now I should put on every quiz questions of the type, why is this not a good answer to this question?
Mhm.
Right? In an open-ended way. And then on the quiz, we'll have to grade those. But if it's a good explanation of why it's not the right answer, now we have the learner sourced explanation to add in next year's version of the quiz, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and similar to that, Ken, I've had a conversation with Norm and Darren recently, and I think they're going to try and work this into Torus for quiz questions to have multiple feedbacks. So, on maybe the first time they take it, they get feedback that is just helps them get to the correct answer without giving them a full solution. But at some point, you may want to give them, a full solution, maybe after it's already past due or whatever. And I believe they're going to be working on a capability to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's a good point, Sandy. I was just about to talk about how the feedback has generally been written for those quiz questions. I know that back on some older courses, we were developing, we weren't developing as much targeted feedback to each answer option in the quizzes, but more directing the feedback to the overall question. And then, of course, never really, trying really hard never to direct the students back to the content, but really give them enough context to learn something from that feedback right then and there. And, different folks authored differently, and maybe some of the feedback on some of the quizzes is not as helpful as we'd like. But yeah, that capability would be really cool to be able to do that, based on attempt, essentially, is what you're talking about, right?
Potentially, or potentially, the ability for the instructor to be able to, release the full solutions, when they want to, because, if they're taking it multiple times, even if you have pools, you don't necessarily want to give them a full solution, but you do want to give them, some helpful information that's going to help them learn and figure out their mistake. So I think that's where we some mechanism for the instructor to be able to release those full solutions.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good too. I mean, that sounds, I guess what I was describing would be even more design. Ken, did you have something to say?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, probably almost always. I was just thinking about, like, one thing I tell students on, particularly on exams, but I would be true for quizzes too, is, if you see ambiguity in a multiple choice question and you want to explain why you chose your answer, I can give you credit if that explanation makes sense. In other words, you say, I interpreted the question as follows, and because of that, I answered B. Maybe my intended answer is A because I didn't, I had a different interpretation of the question. But I'm raising this because that's also another kind of learner sourcing opportunity. Like if it were sort of routinely possible for students to say, for example, you know, if they do get feedback in an inline and they want to say, wait a second, I think my answer, or in a quiz, I think my answer was right because, right? And we give them the opportunity to enter that. It seems like that'd be super useful data to improve those questions and write better feedback on them.
That's a challenge button. You want a challenge button on every answer key, right? Ding.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Sandra, I think Sandra's idea about multi-layered kinds of feedback is really, really interesting. I think I read recently that the blend of direct instruction and unguided discovery, which you call guided discovery, is most effective, right? Minimizing the lecture, but maximizing the guidance during the learning activity. For brick and mortar people, that's right there in the classroom or in the lab portion or whatever. For us fully online people, we're looking for you to provide that guided discovery. So that idea of, ooh, let me set it so the first 3 times they get light review, right? The light response. And then after that, they get the deep response. And then maybe like by the 7th time they've hit an item, it generates an email to me because now I know that person's in trouble, right? That kind of customization of, and again, even for brick and mortar, if you want to find out who's struggling, if you assign them to do it 7 times or something, or do it till you get a 70, that kind of thing, whether it's for a grade or for practice or for homework. That's really interesting. I understand the coding would probably, right? You're adding a whole new layer. You're adding 2 kinds of answer solutions. One kind that's easy to write and one kind that's very challenging to write.
Certainly part of that though is already possible. Like in my class, the quizzes happen before we meet and they can take them as many times as they want until they get the score that they want.
Nice.
And next year we're going to incorporate knowledge. Well, I don't know if it'll happen in time, but hopefully next year we're going to start to incorporate this knowledge tracing algorithms. So instead of taking a full quiz each time, you only redo items for learning objectives that the algorithm has determined you haven't mastered.
Right. The what do they call that? Customizable assessment, differentiated assessment.
Adaptive.
Adaptive, thank you. Yeah, that's the one I've learned, adaptive, right? You get 3 in a row wrong, you're done. Or if you get 1 right, they make it a little harder. Yours is a little different. You're sort of creating a knowledge network describing the student, and you're focusing on the blank spots.
Yeah, there's tons of different algorithms out there for knowledge tracing, like a Bayesian one and so forth. Yeah, but the 3 in a row is certainly one simple approach.
We've designed.
There is currently, for those that don't know, I'm not sure if it exists in Echo, but it is possible within the system, and it's used regularly in the chemistry course, that you can layer feedback within the formative questions. So on an initial feedback, maybe, again, you just give them, some information to guide them. And then, the second or third feedback, you give them the full solution. So that capability is currently there for the formative, but not for quizzes, summative assessment.
I don't know, from what I've seen from data, the having good feedback and having opportunities for repetition, I guess as Gideon was saying, like at least 7 chances kind of thing, that goes a long way. And often we don't have those 7 chances. So I would, and I would say that some of our analyses of layers of hint messages have been kind of disappointing in terms of, do the vaguer hints do much? The answer seems to be either no or can't tell. We've never had a really strong positive result on those layered hint messages. Slightly different than layered feedback, I realize, but
right.
Yeah, I think the repetition piece, new opportunities to get it right on your own without hints or feedback, after having gotten hints or feedback on previous ones, that goes a long way.
And it seems like the key to teaching math and for students to master any kind of math concepts is that repetitive practice, right? And so I know that in the past, when I've been involved at all in any kind of math related courses, that's what's been asked for the most: more practice, more practice, more practice. And so it says usually that's why I think a lot of places have come up with these parameterized questions or variable questions to be able to get to that almost never ending amount of practice.
Haven't found a domain for which that isn't true.
Yeah, true.
Math is maybe the most apparent, but
Yeah.
all the learning curve analyses we've done, it's like there's no magic in any domain. It takes repetition in chemistry and statistics, etc. E-learning.
I think it's all about automaticity. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Right. Once you've automated some processes, you can actually do more thinking, right? Like when you learn to drive. We all drive a lot better than when we had to consciously think, okay, pick that foot up off the accelerator, right? And now we just don't think and get it done. At least in mathematics, that's my main experience. That necessity for automaticity is very large, and maybe it's just the bias of my learning and teaching experiences. I'd have to agree with Ken. I think it's very strong in mathematics compared to even, any other topic. That
Well, I mean,
necessity for base automaticity, because otherwise you can't think conceptually, you can't get to the applications, you can't read. If you don't know your letters, you can't read. If you don't have some automaticity, things go too slow to think deeply.
right. But then even Sebastian put in the chat here, languages, that is another topic. So
Right.
to Ken's point, it really is just about any topic.
Yeah.
You can say that about. It just feels more apparent in math, and I guess more obvious in math content, but yeah, it is that practice. So I had a question and then I lost it there for a second. Kind of getting back to math, what are some specific challenges in math that possibly don't exist in other domains that we'd want to account for?
I don't know if you get into this in your course portfolio or want to, but dynamic geometry is an excellent way to learn. That's an interesting way that students can learn by hands-on practice and observation before they do the algebraic, such as connect the midpoints of a triangle, measure that little triangle, measure the big one, take the ratio. It's always a quarter, but you can't really convince a student until you've got a dynamic diagram that they can move no matter what triangle they make. It's still a 1/4. And then you get into scale factors and proofs and all the other deep math stuff. Is that kind of student controllable, dynamic graphing kind of things, either embeddable in or from elsewhere, like Desmos, or is it part of the native coding system?
I can say that we don't have that as part of the native coding system. We have the ability to integrate different types of third-party activities and labs and things like that exist. But usually the problem with that is getting the data from those systems. So we usually have to follow those up with like native type questions so that we can get some sort of data on how effective those are. But that's really interesting. And that's the kind of thing I want to really get into here, because we don't have courses in geometry or calculus.
Right.
So what are some things that we hadn't even thought of yet that might be needed in those types of courses? And you've given a good example. Thanks for that.
In statistics, weighted averages is something that has a real physical feel, because you can, if you start most of us can in our heads visualize one of those chemistry balance beams or a seesaw, and the big guy has to be twice as close to balance with the two little guys who are twice as far. I mean, that fundamental physical feel that most of us can instantly create in our minds. Well, you know, that's because we all have advanced educations and we're theoretical thinkers because we're interested in this stuff. That would be a great little thing to play with, right? Just from the
Yes.
make it balance 5th grade, 6th grade level, and then you lead them through, right? So if I could embed that from somebody else, or you could create it, I would, you know, the sort of the learning by doing, right? The series of questions within the text that follow up on it and help the student develop, oh, wow, that's weighted averages. That's why I took, you know, the 100th chance of the $1 million payout for the insurance company as a negative and that as a positive. They're just balancing the opposite sides. That's how you balance the opposite sides of the insurance equation or the
Yeah,
weighted
so
averages with things, right?
yeah, so one of the things I'm really excited about in terms of Torus development is the fact that it's being developed open source with this idea of you know, this attention being paid to interoperability and making sure that, you know, we can't develop all these crazy cool things for every particular course, but someone else might be able to, and then be able to easily integrate them in with our content is something that's key. You know, Sandy raised a point in the chat here that, you know, they embed PhET simulations into chemistry. We have some of those in physics as well, and I'm sure other places where, you know, they are manipulatable labs as you're describing, and but the issue there is, I mean, Sandy, we can't necessarily get the data from those, right?
Yeah, that's correct. The way that they're incorporated into the chemistry course is that they're given some instructions to manipulate the simulation in some way. And then there's follow-up questions within OLI, you know, based on what they did in the simulation. So yeah, you really can't collect data directly from it, but they embed very nicely. They look like they're part of the course. But yeah, you can kind of get indirect data from them, but not direct data.
Yeah.
And so that sounds awesome. You know, so if you can embed, you know, Desmos and GeoGebra, and I think those are, you know, the two major tools that come to my mind. Then you've got a lot of content covered if they can be quickly embeddable. And then the follow-up, maybe to you, Sandra, maybe to anybody, right? I'm not a coder. How hard is it going to be for me to write the first low level and then deep conceptual questions, some that I'll make multiple choice, others that will be open feedback, right? Is that, do I have to, you know, learn the second layer, the first layer, or the third layer of that Ken described a while ago to create it, right? I'm almost thinking about, could I take that GeoGebra sketch and take a little page from your operating system and put them together and have a one-page experience for my students glued together out of the OLI underlying system and somebody else's animation? And is that the kind of thing that you're thinking to offer?
So like for the authoring with the PhET simulations that I did in chemistry, you know, there wasn't any heavy coding. Like there's an iframe,
Right, stick in a frame.
stick in an iframe, and that puts the PhET simulation there. And then I, you know, developed a short set of instructions for something specific for students to do, as opposed to, you know, here's this cool thing, try to learn something from it. You know, and if they go through that and then want to, you know, obviously play around with it on their own, then, you know, then that's great too. But, you know, some specific instructions that are just written on the OLI page, and then follow-up questions that go with it. So for what I did, there's no special coding.
The follow-up questions are the part that I was mostly interested / worried about, right? The instructional piece about what to do with the thing embedded in the iframe, you know,
Correct.
that's okay. But what about those interactive questions that I
But you
want to
can author them through the WYSIWYG, form
through the
filling thing.
WYSIWYG?
Yeah.
So that's
So
layer 2. That's layer 2 WYSIWYG. It's not layer 3 underneath. That's what I was wondering.
right. You don't have to write JavaScript.
Right.
Okay, then I'm sold. That sounds wonderful.
So
You know,
I mean, I think
Gideon,
there's interesting design questions, and of course, some around how to write, good. And the cool thing I think is Sandy and Dave in chemistry have a lot of great examples
Mhm.
because they also have a chemistry lab simulation, and why is
beautiful.
the water in Bangladesh bad? Go and do titration in the chem lab to figure it out, and then come back, and there are OLAG questions about it, that sort of thing. So yeah.
So Gideon, it sounds like I need to follow up with you specifically and show you some of these capabilities that you didn't know existed.
I'd love to catch up. Absolutely.
Yes.
And again, apologies if I'm asking questions that are way basic, but
No, I
Perfect.
think
That's great.
I intend to stay below, away from the level of the real coding underneath, right? I want WYSIWYG so I can throw together interesting stuff and adapt it and change it, right? As I'm training people for their licensure exams in mathematics. That changes every once in a while, right? You give me my WYSIWYG, I'm a happy guy.
Yeah.
Right. We learn that we need to do a little more in stats to cover, some state's requirement for teachers. Give me my WYSIWYG to throw in, a short module to address that particular state's needs.
Yeah, I will definitely.
In the stats course, there are these call outs to use R or Minitab or whatever your package are. And maybe not in the version you saw, but I've been wondering, we definitely have the technology to do even kind of like regular expression matching on, write an R command to do this task. I think we could do more in that regard. And I don't know if Torus has there's various versions of regular expressions or stretchy patterns, like in Lightside uses this stretchy pattern idea, where you can basically say, well, this has to be here and this has to be there, but in between, anything's okay, that sort of thing. There's definitely code in CTEC for doing equation matching, for example. That probably could be generalized for other domains.
It sounds like there's a lot at that second layer for WYSIWYG, and even more that can be developed third layer that could be turned into second layer eventually. That's very exciting.
Yeah, I would agree with that statement. So I'm looking through the chat here. Oh, Norm chimed in and said that simulations are starting to be developed to capture data from them, which is nice.
Haven't looked into it, but they're making them now to where you can modify them somewhat. But I haven't dug into that. But I know that's a thing.
Yeah, I'll have to look into that some more. Norm just put a link. So let's see, we've talked about parameterized questions or variable type questions, branching questions a little bit, input keyboards like equation inputs. We've even touched on visualization to some degree, and like how to support more geometry type exploration and integration, which we've covered all of those things. Is there anything else that you guys haven't had the chance to say that would be kind of wish list?
Dave's got his hand up.
Okay.
This is a really boring thing, but the accuracy with which a student has to put in their response, especially when you get to parameterize, some instructors just really care about significant figures and percent accuracy and stuff. And having that built in, and thinking about that would be good. Like what we do now, I think there's a difference between the accuracy with which it is reported, like did they give it to the right number of significant figures, is different from is the value correct? And it can just be a real hassle. You have a lot of the complaints we get are, the response wasn't accepted because of that boring little thing of, you were 5.1% off instead of 5, that kind of stuff. But not sure what to do about it, but it's an important part for many instructors.
Yes, great. And thank you for bringing that up, David. I think there's a couple of things about that, though. We have the ability to author those ranges and to some extent the accuracy at which you want any particular question to be answered. But I think what you're asking for is kind of an instructor global setting, maybe, where the instructor.
That's part of it too. Yeah, different instructors care to differing amounts. Like I really don't care usually, and so, but then instructors who really are sticklers for it, having them be able to say, yes, my students have to get it right.
And even if that's available for even just the high stakes summative assessments, is probably a nice control for the instructor. To be able to say, for this assessment, I'm going to grade it at this level of accuracy or significant figures, or just, anything like that. Interesting. Does that resonate with some others on the call? Well, thanks, Dave. I think that's a great suggestion. And I have definitely talked to different folks, and I am sure if you talk to Hal, who manages our help desk, he's probably had that question asked a bunch, like how to toggle that, or how to manipulate that, right? Ken had here, and this is kind of what I was thinking of earlier too, Ken. Diagrams as input or output, or even just the ability to, there's a lot of graph, there's a lot of graph work that you could probably envision or imagine could be done as question types, right?
Yes, for sure. And yeah, there's a lot of sort of conceptual mapping kinds of questions in math and other domains, like to number lines and fraction bars and that sort of thing. And yeah, so he's it's jointly supervised with someone in software engineering. They've developed this kind of visual programming language and are working on ways to use it to generate diagram-based questions. So yeah, we're definitely looking for possible applications.
Interesting. Yeah, that's great.
There's definitely a lot of ideas being tossed around that could be great content for projects in the OLI track of the Learn Lab Summer School. Wonder if folks know about that opportunity.
Sorry, can I just ask you one thing about the diagram-based problems? Do you have any a link to more information on that? Not sure if that might potentially work for some of the kind of molecule drawing in chemistry. I'm not sure how
well
advanced it is.
I don't know. I think some of those chemistry diagrams are maybe kind of hard to programmatically generate, but maybe not. It would be super interesting. I can that was Sandy, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I can connect you with Nemo, the PhD student, and and see.
Yeah,
But you should, do you know about Martina Rao's work in chemistry, and particularly with chemistry representations? Dave, definitely.
Yeah, that. Well, we have a bunch of people looking to move into organic, and there are these drawing tools, and instructors are okay with having their students to learn how to use one, but it's probably not worth reinventing. I think we'd have to maybe finding open source one we could build in.
But Martina has a ton of questions already authored that involve.
Yeah, I like her stuff, but she's more going after the freshman course and the way they think of structure, and it's not. But there is this thing of, if we're going to move into organic, we need one of these tools built in.
Yeah, I see.
Okay. I just lost my multi-screens here. Oh, I popped in the link to Learn Lab Summer School. It is an amazing experience, and if you haven't done it in any tracks in the past, then I highly encourage anyone on here to go and attend and do it. And you don't have to be worried that you have to do something really or that I've had people tell me like, oh, is it really for me, and ask me questions about that, and I just have to say just jump in and go, because the experience is amazing. You get exposed to other aspects of learning engineering that you might not even know exist, and it's a really great energy, and you get to see a lot of different things going on. So I highly encourage it. It's a great experience. It's a really good way to get your feet wet and just, dip a toe in even and get that exposure. And we have had folks who in the OLI track develop materials, put them out, got data collected on them from the other participants, and iterated on those materials just in all a 1 week time frame. So it's pretty fun, and you learn a lot. Yeah, thanks, Ken, for putting more information in there for folks. So yeah, I don't know if there's anything else that you all want to share with me and share with all of us about math in particular. It is online this year, Sandy, just so you know. Thanks for asking.
The application deadline is May 28th. But since it will be online, we're much more open to anyone coming. But we use the applications to help make project teams, and each team gets 2 mentors, and they're different tracks do that slightly differently. But that's a general idea, is that it's really hands-on. As they're general lectures, but there's a lot of hands-on work with mentorship along the way. It's a great way to not just learn the tools, but learn about some of the design issues around using them well.
Great, thanks. Well, I think that's a great note to end on. I want to thank everyone for coming and sharing their ideas and experiences, and I will certainly follow up with some folks who by the way, if anyone ever needs some one-on-one demos or walking through some functionality that we have available already, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm always happy to talk and show things and dig in to the tools and talk shop, talk design. Yeah, just thanks everyone. And the next meeting, let me see, will be on, I can share my screen here and show that. Or not, because I can't find the right window to show, but essentially it's on external tools integration is the topic. So I'm sure there'll be a lot to talk about there, as always. And check out the Torus community page. Let me get that link for you as well, so that you can sign up for external. You can sign up for more of these meetings, or even there's a link on there to submit ideas for Torus. However, know that we take very detailed notes in this meeting, and we actually produce user stories out of the conversations that we have. So just so you know that whatever's discussed here, really, we take it seriously and we consider it as part of what we need to build into Torus. So let me share that link. And yeah, have a great weekend, everyone. And
sorry, I have a quick question.
Please,
I'm a little bit unclear if the best way for me to proceed is to schedule a one-on-one meeting or just to add like a file to that community page. The Student Cognition Toolbox team missed the first session, and I watched the whole session this morning to see what I had missed, and I took notes, and there were additional things that I wanted to talk about. So I just didn't know what the most appropriate way to go about doing that with you is. Is it to submit a file or to schedule a meeting?
Lauren, I'll reach out to you. Let's schedule something. Let's you and I just talk and talk through all the needs, because I know you guys use the full functionality of of Echo and OLI. So yeah, I think that's worth a one-on-one to see where all of you know, what all we can enhance for you.
Thank you so much, Erin.
I'll follow up.
Okay, great.
Great. Thank you all so much. Have a great weekend.
Bye.
Thank you, Erin.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.